Hey everybody, this is Heidi Gusted from the blog Hands Occupied with another knitting video tutorial for you. In this video, we are tackling two-color brioche rib worked flat. To get started knitting two-color brioche rib, there's a couple vocabulary words you're going to want to master before diving right in. So the first thing is, this is a swatch of blocked two-color brioche rib done in a cotton yarn. And so the main thing to know while watching this video is the difference between your dark side and your light side. So I've got this yellow yarn and this blue yarn, and my swatch is also done in a yellow and blue. And so I'm going to make sure that my vocabulary words from the swatch line up with what I'm knitting on with this yarn. And so what we're looking at here is known as the dark side of our swatch. And when you flip it over, we're looking at the light side. And so our dark yarn in this case is going to be the blue yarn, and the light yarn is going to be yellow. And so this side we know is the dark side of our swatch because the dominant color is the blue. And you know it's the dominant color because it's sticking out the most to the front and it's laying evenly in these nice ribbed V's. And now on the other side we know it's the light side because the yellow is the dominant. So just something to keep in mind before we get started. So to work two-color brioche rib, you're going to need to cast on a multiple of 2 stitches plus 1. For demonstration's sake, I have done 9 stitches here. So to do our setup row for our two-color brioche rib, we're going to start by purling 1 stitch, and I'm working in the light color, as you can see with this yellow. So we've purled 1, and now what we're going to do is a yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over. So we take our working yarn to the front, and we're slipping the next stitch and doing a yarn over at the same time without working a stitch and slipping it off to the right needle. So there's this X that's formed and we're ready to keep going. To show you that again, we're going to purl 1 and do a yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, forming an X. Again, that's a purl 1, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, purl 1, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, and we're ending with a purl 1. So there is our setup row in our light color. Now what we're going to do is not turn our work. So what we're going to do is slide our stitches to the other end of our needle, and you should be working on double pointed needles like these or circulars for this technique. And what we're going to do is grab our dark yarn, which in this case is blue, and start working with that. So what we're going to do is slip the first stitch as if to purl. And next we're going to do a stitch called a bark. So it's abbreviated BRK, and that stands for brioche knit. So we're going to put our working needle in between both loops of this X from our yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over from the setup row. We're going to grab our dark yarn, yarn it over, and bring it through to brioche knit this next stitch, like so. Now what we're going to do is a yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over. And what's nice about doing this in the dark colors, you can really see how the mechanics work for the yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over. So the yarn's in front, we're slipping 1, so it's the yellow loop we're slipping, and the yarn over is the blue, and there's that X. Next, we will brioche knit through that other X, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, forming an X, brioche knit through the X, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit, and we're going to end with our yarn in front, slipping 1 but not doing a yarn over. So this is what your work should look like. So the edges are going to be framed in the light color or the yellow. So we've done the slipping of those 2 on the edges, and then we've got our brioche knit, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit, yarn in front, slip 1, yarn over, brioche knit. So understanding the anatomy of a brioche stitch is probably the hardest thing to wrap your head around, no pun intended, when you're new to brioche. And the other thing is, you know, before we worked our setup row, and instead of turning our work, we slipped the stitches to the other end of our needle. So you'll be working 2 rows on the same side each time before turning, which we're about to do. So we're turning our work like so. So now we are on the next row in our work. And so this is light side, light color, row 1. So we're on the light side of our work. So looking at our swatch, it'll be this side that we're creating on. And since it's a light side, light color row, that means we're working with the light color yarn. So this is the light side, which means we'll be knitting with our light color. So we've got our working yarn all combobulated, and we will start with a knit stitch. Then yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, knit, brioche style. Yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit. And remember from last time, brioche knit is when you work through both loops of that X from the previous row. Yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, and then you end with just a regular knit stitch. Now you'll notice you've got your light or your yellow working yarn on the left side and your blue or your dark working yarn on the right. So now it's time to slip our stitches to the other end of our double pointed needle, but not yet turn our work. So now, since this is the light side dark color, we're going to start by slipping the first stitch, bringing our working yarn to the front, and doing what's called a burp or a brioche purl. So we are going to purl through both loops of the X of the brioche stitch to brioche purl, and then yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl. And since this is the dark color, all we're going to do is bring our yarn to the front and slip the last stitch without working it. So now you might be starting to see and understand the pattern that's in play to create this 2-color brioche rib. Now both of our working yarns are on the left side of our needle, so it's time to turn our work. All right, now we're in the next row. So we're on the dark side this time, which, looking at our swatch, would be this side where the blue's dominant, or the dark color. So this is the dark color side, and we're going to start like usual by working with our light colored yarn. So it's the dark side, so we'll start with a purl in our light color. Purl, and then yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, and then brioche purl. So I know the last row across we worked was also a brioche purl, but you have to do brioche knit for 1 row, brioche purl for another row, another brioche purl, and then a brioche knit. And that's just the mechanics of how the 2-color brioche rib works to get the knit and purl ribbing to line up with the slipping stitches and turning every other row. So we're going to brioche purl, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, and we frame it out with a purl 1. And now, if you're starting to get the hang of this, you'll know that since the light color is on the left, the dark color is on the right, it's time to slip to the other end of our needle without turning and do our dark side dark color row. And so we start by slipping the first stitch and then brioche knit. Since this is dark color on dark side, you know to work a brioche knit and not a brioche purl because you're forming this dominant vertical row of the dark color rib. So continuing on, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, yarn in front, slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit, and then we'll end with our yarn in front and a plain old slip stitch. So So you can see, once I've worked all the way through the setup rows and one set each of a dark side and a light side row, you can now see the high contrast, beautiful, beautiful poofy texture of the brioche rib stitch come together. And so brioche is really popular right now, and it might seem like a lot to wrap your head around if it's your first time doing it, but just keep watching this video and other tutorial videos on how to do brioche a few times, and then I would recommend putting together a practice swatch for yourself, not unlike this one, so that you can really master how those yarn and front slip one yarn overs work, the sliding of the stitches, and the placements of the knit versus purl. Two-color brioche rib is right at home in really fun and funky and contemporary shawl projects that you might be seeing on Ravelry and other places around the internet, and it also makes great scarves and cowls. If you have any questions for any of us on how to work two-color brioche rib or other questions about brioche, go ahead and let us know in the comments, and tune in again soon for more tutorials.